Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We're recording this. Working with the age.
Morning, everyone. We're just going to wait one more minute because we've had about 60 people register, so we're halfway there. But we will start in a moment. Reward everyone who's on time. Morning.
Hello.
Good morning. Hi, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. All right. Well, we might get started. Thank you to everyone who's joined us for our second Community Cooperatives Community of Practice meeting. We had our first meeting back in August. So the Community of Practice is your space to connect, learn and share ideas, particularly with a focus on improving wellbeing in the Northern Sydney region. I would like to also acknowledge the Aboriginal lands of the Northern Sydney region and its traditional custodians, the Cammeraygal people. I would like to pay my respects to past, present and emerging elders.
The second Gold Coast Suns player to win the AFL's Brownlow medal.
We've got someone's mic on.
Has officially left Red Bull's Formula.
Thank you. I would like to pay my respects to past, present and emerging elders. As our organisation works to serve the community's health needs, we recognise the importance of the land and waterways as an essential component of people's health and wellbeing. We also recognise that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander knowledge and learning are integral to the cultural fabric of all Australians. Thank you and welcome everyone. So in today's meeting, we will hear from a special guest, Gillian McPhee from the Business Council Cooperatives and Mutuals. Gillian's online now. Gillian will be speaking about the work that BCCM does, as well as share insights and case studies on successful community cooperatives. But before we hear from Gillian, I would like to introduce Sydney North Health Network's General Manager of Commissioning, Eugene McGarrell, who will be sharing a little about our transformative strategy and outlining the three main tactics that aim to support stronger wellbeing in our region.
Thanks, Anya. And welcome everybody to the second COP for the COPs. Now, those of you that were on the first session that we had a few weeks ago will have had a good sort of overview. Yeah, a good overview of what we're planning to do. But just very quickly, before we get into the main item for today, Sydney North Health Network are really sort of focused their strategic plan to promote and improve the wellbeing of the population across Northern Sydney, with particular focus on health inequity. And that's really to say that there are pockets of disadvantage across Northern Sydney where people are not able to access healthcare for a whole range of reasons. So our role really is to make sure that we adapt our service offerings to those people so that they are able to access the healthcare that most other people take for granted. And so we have three strategies to make that a reality. Overlapping that is the Wellbeing Collaborative, and this is an opportunity to build a network of interested people, communities, providers, politicians, business, philanthropists to come together and to think about how best to promote well-being, what services are required to support people and to promote their well-being and their longevity, with a particular focus on suicide prevention, as well as mental health and addiction. So that's the first strategy, and we've currently got 350 people signed up to the Wellbeing Collaborative. And if you're not already signed up, we encourage you to do that. We will be looking to delegate or to devolve that Wellbeing Collaborative to local place, so that we've got a more granular approach to the strategy, and people can come together and look at what are the issues that matter to them and what solutions should be designed to sort of solve those particular solutions. The second strand of that strategy is to create a integrated service hub for those people, so that we meet people where they are. Access to services are easier, and there are no barriers to access, which include financial, language, culture, whatever that might be. And that the services have no wrong door, that anyone can access those services in the way that suits them. But that once they access those services, they are navigated to the range of services that they need for that particular person. So taking a person-centered approach to service delivery. And those hubs will be up and running from the 1st of July next year. We're about to go next week to market to procure for those services, and there's been a whole process of co-design with community and providers to develop the service specifications for those services from the 1st of July. The third arm is the community cooperative arm, and there we're looking to support the market to create community cooperatives to do a number of things. First of all, we're looking for them to be able to be part of those integrated hubs. So we're looking for community cooperatives to be able to provide services such as service navigation, peer work, lived experience, backbone support, etc. But we're also looking to support those current community initiatives that are running at the moment with the smell of an oily rag, to really help them create an organizational entity, so they're able to attract funding not only from the PHN but from other sources as well. So our vision is that we have a vibrant cooperative market across northern Sydney. Some of that work will be to support the work that we're doing in the hubs, but some of that other work might also be helping to create local solutions for local community. So that's our overall strategy. And today we're really looking at the community cooperative space. And we you're going to do an intro. Yeah. So we have Gillian from the Business Chamber of Communities and Mutual to talk to us about their experience in setting up and supporting cooperatives, I think over the last 10 years, if not more. So before we start, Anya will give a little introduction to Gillian, and then Gillian will give her presentation. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Eugene. Okay, so I would like to introduce Gillian McPhee. Gillian is an experienced CEO and company director and a fellow of the Australian Institute of Company Directors, with extensive experience working in social care, housing and community care sectors for the New South Wales Government and for purpose organisations. Between 2005 and 2011, Gillian was Director, Uniting Care Ageing, where she had complex change management to integrate 52 local aged care boards into a unified organisation with new operating systems and an ambitious strategic plan. Since 2012, as Managing Director of Gillian McPhee and Associates, Pty Ltd, Gillian has undertaken strategic and operational consulting roles, including for the Business Council of Australia, Housing New South Wales, and more recently with the Business Council of Cooperatives and Mutuals, BCCM. Through her work with BCCM, Gillian has become a subject matter expert on the application of the cooperative and mutual business model in social care. Over the last 2.5 years, Gillian's role was Program Director for the Care Together program, an innovative cooperative development program funded by the Australian Government to improve the sustainability of social care in regional, rural and remote areas of Australia through a cooperative business model. Due to its success, Care Together has been extended for another year, where Gillian is serving as a strategic advisor. Thank you, Gillian.
Thank you, Anya, and thank you to Eugene and Sharon, all of your team, for inviting me today, and thank you for that introduction as well. Can I just say, in starting, I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where we're meeting today. I'm here in North Sydney, similar location, no doubt, to where you are, and I want to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Can I say that I feel I'm a bit of a newcomer to the cooperative sector. Anya's explained to you my history of working, which has been in a range of sectors, but all in what is now called the care and support economy. And it's been a great privilege to me over the last few years to discover the cooperative business model, because I had got to a stage in my career, as positive as all of those opportunities were, that I felt increasingly disillusioned with the way in which care was delivered in Australian communities, and particularly the way in which many services were becoming privatised and the hierarchical models in which they operated, often disempowering the two people, I think, who are most important in any care relationship. And I think this picture at the front page says it all: the care worker and the care receiver. So co-ops have been an opportunity for me to start to explore a different way of governing and organising care and support services. So next slide, Sharon. So today's purpose, after that really inspirational introduction from Eugene, which is just remarkable that a PHN is taking this innovative leadership approach. My role today is to share information and experience about the benefits of cooperatives and some other support sectors, and also, and this is a key point, to energise those of you who might be curious about how a cooperative could provide the legal and governance framework as a foundation for community ownership of integrated care and support services. This is an innovative opportunity that's been created for you in Northern Sydney to potentially apply the cooperative business model to facilitate community ownership, where communities are placed at the centre of the services that are commissioned, and to do this particularly for people with special needs. So we have this opportunity, as I understand it, to propose co-ops for 4 particular areas in Ryde, Hornsby, Northern Beaches, and for First Nations communities. So it's a unique opportunity for you to shape how care services are commissioned and delivered in Northern Sydney. So next slide. So what I'm going to cover today is to go through explaining to you about cooperatives. I'm imagining that some of you probably know quite a lot, but there's probably people sitting there thinking, what is a cooperative? So I'm going to give you a high-level explanation of that so that you can relate to that. I'm going to draw on some of the case studies from the Care Together program, and that brings to life, I think, some of the options that you might like to consider. Also want to talk about lessons learned. We had our program monitored, evaluated and researched by the Monash School of Business, and so I'll be drawing on their report. And then I want to talk about how BCCM, the Business Council of Cooperatives and Mutuals, can help, and then end with a call to action and closing comments. So a background to Care Together, if I can just say a few words about that. Care Together has been funded by what is now the Department of Health, Disability and Ageing under the Labor government. And it was Care Together was the first cooperative and mutual development program that was actually developed to provide cooperative development advice and support to people in regional, rural and remote communities. So Care Together came out of the Aged Care Royal Commission, where the Commission found a dire shortage of services in those areas, with that undersupply expected to continue. So our focus and the case studies I'll be showing you are from mostly rural communities, but that is not to say that the cooperative model does not work well in cities as well. In fact, when we get to some of the models which are participant-led, you actually need numbers to make those projects viable. So next slide. I just got muted, did I? Is that just happened? Okay, sorry, please. I don't know how that happened. So co-ops and mutuals, what are they? Cooperatives and mutuals are member-owned businesses formed to benefit the people who use them or work in them, rather than in creating shareholder value. So they're different to other organisational forms because their purpose is to create value for their members rather than profit incentives for shareholders. Cooperatives exist in every part of the Australian economy. For those of you who are interested, you can go on to the BCCM website and read about the National Mutual Economy Report, which BCCM produces each year. Co-ops actually make up a majority of cooperative and mutual enterprises in Australia, which range from around about 1400 to 1491 in Australia. So the figures are quite precise there. And of course, the Business Council of Co-ops and Mutuals is the peak body for co-ops and mutuals in Australia, and it is a member of the International Cooperative Alliance, which we will talk about later. Next slide. So cooperative identity. So that's cooperative speak for what is a cooperative. A cooperative is an autonomous association of people, persons who are united voluntarily to meet their common economic, social and cultural needs and aspirations through a jointly owned and democratically controlled enterprise. Co-ops and mutuals are thriving in all parts of the world. 2025 is actually the second international year for cooperatives. In 2012, United Nations declared the first international year for cooperatives, and that has now been repeated again in 2025. The focus, and I think this is also important for your project, the focus of the International Year of Cooperatives in 2025 is actually on the Sustainable Development Goals. And as you know, there are 17 of those, but the one that is most relevant to what you're doing is the one about ensuring healthy lives and promoting well-being for people of all ages by reducing diseases, improving healthcare, and supporting mental health. So that gives you just a bit of a background about cooperatives and how they operate. Next slide, please. So 8 in 10 Australians are actually members of at least one cooperative or mutually owned organisation. The bit I don't put up there is that only 3 in 10 know they are. And so therein lies one of the greatest challenges for the cooperative movement, which is around information and awareness. Cooperatives are a rational alternative to investor-owned models. However, their purpose, the purpose of cooperatives, is to create shared value for the stakeholders, the members, rather than to create shareholder value for investors. So this is part of a diversity of ownership models, and the Business Council of Cooperatives and Mutuals is very clear about that. They're not necessarily saying co-ops are for everyone, but there are certainly in some communities, some markets, where co-ops actually work better. Now, there can be different types of members in co-ops, and this all depends on what the purpose of the cooperative is. Some of those membership types can be individuals, you know, people in communities who come together to cooperate around meeting a need. They can be groups of businesses or organisations that come together as members. They can be producers, you know, and that's particularly a key issue in regional, rural and remote farming communities, for instance. They can be policyholders, roadside assistance members. They can be workers, worker-owned cooperatives. There are many of them in overseas countries, not so many here, but that is a wonderful model with great potential in care and support sectors. And even some of the large super funds are mutually and cooperatively owned. So some of you may not know of co-ops in Australia, but just to give you an example of some, the CBH Group is the largest co-op in Australia, and its members are farmers who actually grow wheat. And what CBH does is manages all their logistics so that they can get their wheat to market. The health funds I've mentioned, you know, HCF and HBF are member-owned cooperative health funds. Australian Unity, also in health insurance, but a very large aged care provider as well, is a BCCM member and is a mutual. Capricorn Society, which is an interesting model where small motor mechanics have come together to become a member of the Capricorn Society. And basically what Capricorn does, a bit like CPH, they manage the value chain of those small business mechanics and helps them with purchasing. Automobile clubs, you know, like the NRMA, I mean, they're some of the longest standing mutuals in Australia. There are cooperative banks like Beyond Bank, credit unions, many of which are now becoming mutual banks. And also, importantly, First Nations cooperatives. Of course, many of the Aboriginal community-controlled health organisations were cooperatives before then. Examples of Aboriginal co-ops include the Aboriginal Medical Service at Redfern, also a wonderful co-op that we've worked with in Bowen in Queensland, Giradala, which is involved in health, housing and care services, and of course Tranby College here in Sydney, which is an educational provider. So it's a rich ecosystem of co-ops and mutuals that we have here in Australia. Next slide. So through the International Cooperative Alliance, there is a statement of cooperative identity that was adopted in 1995, and it's global for the International Cooperative Alliance. And co-ops are based around recognised values. So they're based on the values of self-help, self-responsibility, democracy, equality, equity, and solidarity. All of those words speak volumes to people coming together and cooperating as a way of doing business as opposed to competing. Co-op members believe in ethical values of honesty, openness, social responsibility, and caring for others. So next slide. The other part of the International Cooperative Alliance Statement of Mutual Identity is around the 7 international cooperative principles. And these, I believe, are the heart and soul of what you need to be thinking about as you work towards forming your co-ops. There are 7 cooperative principles, and I'll go through them. Voluntary and open membership is the first one. What that means is you can't force people to join a cooperative. It has to be open and voluntary. And this is where people come together because they inherently believe that cooperation is a better way of working in order to produce value for members. Democratic member control is the second principle. And basically what this means is one member, one vote. So not like shareholder companies where the more shares you've got, the more power and influence you have in the company. That's not how cooperatives work. You can have shares in co-ops, but it's still one member, one vote, and they are run democratically. So in cooperatives, which I believe will be the model you're looking at rather than a mutual, which are larger and for some of those more financially and commercially orientated examples I gave you, you must have, under the cooperative's national law, a majority of members on the board. Okay? You can have independent members, but a majority need to be members. So it is the members who are controlling the cooperative. The next principle is autonomy and independence. So cooperatives are accountable to themselves. You know, they don't line up with other organisations to, you know, promote other causes that do not align with cooperatives. But you will see further down there, cooperation among cooperatives is a very key theme to how cooperatives operate. Education, training and information is pivotal to co-ops. That's what we're doing now is, you know, starting an early journey to educate you about cooperatives. But when I talk later about the Care Together projects, you will see that there has been deep immersion to actually educate those people to form those new cooperatives. And the final of the principles is concern for community. So co-ops give back to their community. Next slide. So this looks a bit complex, but what I'm trying to show you here is the value chain, if you like, that co-ops create for their members. And basically, the cooperative development methodology that we have developed in BCCM that we used on Care Together projects evolves out of this. So looking at the left side of the screen there, you've got 3 main ways that people would come together to form a co-op. There might be social reasons, economic reasons, cultural reasons, or there may be combinations of those. The next point along is about member reason. You know, why has the co-op formed? What is the need that the cooperative is seeking to achieve? And how will it actually create value for its members? And, you know, that value, as I said, can come in numerous ways. It could be starting a co-op in a community where the services that you seek to provide are currently not available. It could be about adding financial value and investment. It could be about providing high quality service products, or it could be around peer connection and shared ownership. So, you know, as I understand what is proposed for the co-ops here in Northern Sydney, this is about bringing people together to actually create community benefit and to actually provide services to people who are otherwise disadvantaged through the health system. And then the final part there is measuring value. So, you know, as with any business, you need to be able to measure the value, the productivity that you are generating. So we use the Monash University Mutual Value Measurement Tool that was developed collaboratively with BCCM. So it's quite unique and is now being used internationally. And there are 6 dimensions of value. Don't get too hung up about those terms. And if we get the privilege to work with some of your co-ops, we'll take you through this. But the first dimension of value is commerciality. So that's about financial sustainability. The second one is about shaping markets. Now that's going to be central to what you're doing, because that is exactly what Eugene has outlined, that you are going to try and change and reshape the market to suit the needs of a particular cohort of people. Member relationships, the quality of the relationships between members is the next one. Community relationships, as I said, you know, concern for community is one of the principles. So how does the co-op relate to its wider community? Ecosystem and reciprocity. How does the co-op give back, both within and to the wider community sector? And then mutual mindset is the backbone, I believe, of value, which is the cultural piece. You know, how do you hold yourself true to the cooperative values and principles and build that into everything that you do, you know, your policies, your practices, the way you run your board meetings, how you recruit and engage with people in the community. So next slide. So this is a slide that I thought I would include. It's the result of a recent exploratory study that BCCM commissioned Per Capita to do, and it actually reflects outcomes of similar studies that have been done overseas. And really, to me, this slide is about the cooperative difference. So it really is about saying that there are circumstances in which cooperative models are actually superior, they're better, they actually create more value for the people that they serve rather than investor-owned firms. So that what Per Capita set out to do was to compare investor-owned firms with cooperatively owned firms, particularly in relation to how enabling they were for employment. And what they actually found was that compared to investor-owned firms, cooperatives and mutuals are much more likely to retain employment even when their revenue margins are not as high. Whereas, and it would come as no surprise, that mostly what happens with investor-owned firms is that they would cut back on employment opportunities. So it's this dimension of value that particularly makes co-ops very suitable for so-called thin markets. Regional, rural and remote communities are an example. but what you're trying to do, I think, is an example as well. So next slide. So what I now want to do, we'll go to the next slide, is I'm going to draw on some of the co-op projects that we developed in Care Together, just to give you an example and a bit of a flavour for community-owned co-ops. So Nunda Community Enterprises, the Nunda Co-op, we call it, is a worker-owned cooperative. Its focus is on providing meaningful employment and training opportunities for people with disability. It was formed in 1998 and it's now stronger than ever to create sustainable employment and training opportunities for people with cognitive and or psychosocial support and disabilities. Nunda describes this as a flow-through model, the way they operate it, and that is they basically have a blended employment model where training and education is actually part of the delivery mechanism. So people with disabilities work alongside people without disabilities and they learn and grow in their capacity. So it's a blended workforce. And they have 3 revenue streams now. It started with maintenance and gardening as a result of a contract, a procurement contract with the Nunda, the local council, and that's around maintenance and gardening. So that's been their core model. They've now branched out into locally place-based cafes, and they are also now, some of their members, as I say, have been members for over 20 years, are presenting at public events to actually educate people around the cooperative model. The next slide. The next slide is supporting independent living cooperative, or SILC for shorthand. It was established in 2015, and the members of this cooperative are families whose children with disabilities would otherwise have been living in group homes. So SILC, the energy behind SILC was a wonderful man called Steve Anthony, whose son had a disability, and they had had very bad experiences with group homes, and Steve thought this could certainly be done differently. Eugene, of course, was around at that time when BCCM, Melina Morrison, the CEO, and myself were asked to come on board and help Steve to form this cooperative. And what he has created here is a cooperative where they are family governed. So these homes are set up by the families. The workers who are selected by the families are actually part of the governance model. They're not members, but most of the workers in these SILC homes stay for a very long time. They're very, very committed. SILC is an example of what we call in cooperatives land a secondary co-op. So the primary co-ops are the family governed homes, the smaller co-ops, and the secondary co-op provides back office services to those smaller homes. And you would appreciate that in care and support sectors where you've got a lot of regulatory compliance, you can't necessarily duplicate that many times over every time a co-op forms. So what we have found, and this is, you know, an international experience as well, is that this notion of primary and secondary co-ops works well, where the secondary co-ops provide a range of back office services. In SILC's case, not all of those services are mandatory for each family governed homes, but the ones that are the ones that really matter in relation particularly to their regulatory compliance. So SILC actually manages all of the regulatory compliance and is accountable to the NDIS for that. And we'll show you some other examples of that as we go through some other examples. So the next one, please, next slide. So this slide is another example of a secondary co-op, a shared services co-op. Elevate is a US-based co-op. And again, one of the benefits of being part of the International Cooperative Alliance is you get to meet these amazing people who are setting up and running co-ops in a wonderful way. And what Elevate has done over in the US is it's formed through a network of home care health workers who are smaller place-based cooperatives, mostly operating, not all, but mostly operating across regional, rural and remote locations. And what they have set about to do is to provide a series of back office services. So they started with website design and digital marketing as a sales solution, and that was designed in collaboration with the worker co-ops, and they now then are able to access those services. Elevate has gone on to deliver other shared services, but the key point of including this in this slide is that as part of the Care Together program, we were able to bring representatives from Elevate, including some of the workers, to Australia to help inform and co-design the work that we did on one of the Care Together projects, which was to develop and test a prototype for a nationally owned shared services cooperative, which has a working title at the moment of Mutual Care Limited. So this is one of the projects which the Department of Health and Aged Care have actually highlighted for priority in our extension, is to get this up and running with a number of test cases. So next slide. So the Murrumbidgee Aged Care Network Cooperative is another of the projects that the department has asked us to focus on developing further. And what this co-op is an example of is a place-based approach to forming a secondary co-op. So in this case, small independent providers came together in the Murrumbidgee region to basically look at the way in which they could set up a shared services co-op by centralising their key non-clinical functions, such as recruitment, IT support, compliance, training, reporting, software management. And they found that by cooperating, that they can emulate the efficiency of larger organisations, but doing this without sacrificing their community ownership and the focus that they want to keep on delivering high quality care that is bespoke to the communities that they operate in. So this particular model is much more than a structural solution. It's actually got potential to become a movement to protect community ownership in regional, rural and remote communities. So you can understand with the focus of the Aged Care Royal Commission on trying to improve the equity and fairness of care and support services in regional and remote communities, that these shared services models are really high on the department's list. But I can see from the conversations we've had with Eugene and his team that some elements of shared services could also be appropriate for you. Next slide. The next slide is one which I have personally worked quite a lot on, and that is the Eurobodalla Community Care Cooperative. This is a cooperative where the members are independent workers and sole traders. So these are people who, prior to the NDIS, were largely employed by state government agencies in psychosocial support, mental health types of roles. The NDIS came in, They had always intended to form a co-op, but needed to respond with such speed that they couldn't. So they actually formed a sole traders network, which has been a loose way of meeting and comparing notes. With the NDIS review, they saw the writing on the wall in terms of compulsory registration, which is gradually being introduced in the NDIS, and they saw this as their opportunity to come together and form the co-op. These are a group of workers who value their independence. They've worked in traditional organisations, and that's not what they want to do. They are very much motivated to support and improve the quality of life of the people for whom they're delivering services. So remember what I said right at the beginning about, the key people involved in any care relationship are the caregivers and the care receivers. So currently they have 12 registered members with aspirations to grow to 30 in year 1 and 40 to 50 in year 2. So in the case of this co-op, as with the others that I've mentioned that were in the Care Together program, we've been able to take them through to a point where they are a registered co-op. Now we are entering a phase of building their sustainability, which Care Together are working with them in the extension. Next slide. So the Glen Innes Community Health Cooperative, just watching the time here, the Glen Innes Community Health Hub Cooperative. So this was actually one of the first Care Together projects that was commenced, and it came about when the chair of the board of the PHN up there in the Central Coast Hunter, New England area approached us about a cooperative solution to build on some fantastic work that the PHN had done called their Better Health for the Bush. And they had, at the time when we started to work with them, approval for a primary health clinic, but they knew that they didn't want to set that up in traditional sorts of ways, that whilst primary health care would be the centrepiece of it, their vision was that the clinic, or the hub as they've now called it, would actually provide multidisciplinary services to meet individual communities, in this case like Glen Innes, which is where they had the funding. So basically they were looking for the hub to provide place-based services, but also outreach to around 9,000 residents in outlying areas. There have been other collaborators with this project, particularly the Glen Innes Shire Council and the Chamber of Commerce. So what has happened with this co-op, and I must say, we learnt a lot about a PHN approach, and, I commend Eugene and his team for the amount of work you've done. The beauty, I guess, is that Eugene knew about co-ops, so that there's been a lot more preparation that you've been able to put into the work that you're doing. With this Glen Innes project, there was a lot of work we had to do around education and raising awareness. But where the Glen Innes hub has landed is that they do now have a provider who is signed up to the cooperative business model. So the primary health service is operating, but they are basically, they have formed a co-op which is community owned. So it brings together community leaders in the co-op, in the community, to actually work alongside the PHN. And I know that the PHN there has got aspirations for that co-op becoming much more involved in commissioning and perhaps being the entity, the cooperative entity that operates in these place-based areas. Next slide. So Cooperative Care Wagen is another project that we were able to get through and fully are registered, so that they, within the time frame that we had, they are now registered as Cooperative Care Wagen. For those of you who don't know where Wagen is, I didn't when I went there the first time. It's in the wheat belt of Western Australia. It's about a 4.5 hour drive from Perth, and the wheat belt of Western Australia is huge. It is absolutely huge. So what we've actually done in the Wagen community could be replicated in many other communities, but only if those communities were open to it. So basically what this particular cooperative solution set about trying to solve was to break down the silos. You know, there are providers in Wagen, but they were all operating in silos, and some of them quite closely guarding their roles and not quite understanding the role of cooperation. So what they have done is come together. Again, there was a lot of cooperative development work that needed to be done to educate them, and they have now come together and formed a community-owned co-op. So I would call this, what we call this, a multi-stakeholder cooperative, because there were so many different players. They needed them to be involved, you know, in order to start to break down some of these silos. So they've received some startup funding from the CBH group and from another local cooperative as well. And that has enabled them to lease some office space. And they have now started a concierge service as a way of starting to build support for what they're trying to do. Their interest is very much about social engagement and possibly even a forerunner, I know, to some of what you're thinking about in terms of social prescribing, you know, to break down some of the isolation. But a very important part of their role is helping people navigate getting access to healthcare, disability, aged care, veterans care in the Wagen community by making sure through local citizens, this is all voluntary labour at this stage, that they're connected into the right people at the right time. And the Main Street office that you're seeing there, that's right at the centre of Wagen, is the place where people know they can come and drop in. So next slide. So COTA, the Council on the Ageing Australia, they basically came to us with a project suggestion, which was that they wanted to co-design what a participant-led cooperative would look like. I think you all know that most of our, certainly in aged care, the services are very much provider-led. What COTA wanted to do, particularly in the context of a new rights-based Aged Care Act, they wanted to see what would it look like if the members were hundreds and hundreds of cooperatives, some of them place-based. You know, how would the commissioning of those services be different? So what we were able to do was actually work with a group of older Australians, most of whom were self-managing their home care, soon to be called supported home care packages. These people preferred the flexibility that they had with being able to self-manage, but, you know, they were keen, and so was COTA keen, to see how could you actually do this at scale. So they actually co-designed with us a model of a cooperative. We were not able to obviously take that project through to formation, but a very thoughtful issues paper has been prepared. And this will be one, particularly with the work that's happening around breaking down the silos and some of the agenda from the Primary Health, the Productivity Commission will take forward. So next slide, please. And so now I'm getting to some of the lessons learned. And I said at the beginning that Monash Business School did our research, monitoring and evaluation. The program was designed around a theory of change. So all of the markers that we had actually set for ourselves in terms of how we would measure and report on success were built into this framework. And the key lessons learned, and I've had to summarise because there was quite a long list. The first is the importance of focusing on the innovation aspects of this approach. Sometimes we jump into counting things, which of course isn't actually helping you to measure impact. So the innovation component is very important to keep that alive. The second key lesson was that significant time and investment is needed for these community-led co-ops to be authentic, and it's really great to see that Eugene and his team have thought through and made provision for that time. The third lesson learned is that community interest can't be manufactured from outside, that successful co-op development requires genuine grassroots engagement. So those of us who've been in cooperative development roles, which is what we would do if BCCM was to help you with a similar program, we have to stand back and facilitate the conversations, but the development of the co-op and its purpose and how it adds value is something that's got to come from the members. The fourth point is to recognise that co-op advisors and developers are all different. They've all got different backgrounds with different skills and strengths. And the great thing about Care Together now is that we have a group of co-op developers that we can call on for different times, for different projects, and to share that experience. And the final key learning, and this was a major one, was that the regulatory environment in Australia needs to be much more cooperatively neutral, and we would say cooperatively friendly in particularly thin market areas like regional, rural and remote communities where they actually make sense. So this requires regulators to understand cooperatives more than they do and to establish consultation channels to ensure that co-ops are considered in policy. One of the earliest things that happened when we started to engage with the Thin Markets and Innovation branch in the Department of then Health and Aged Care was that we came across a provision that was actually proposed for the legislation and the rules, which actually required a majority of members of any funded organisation to be independent. And had that gone through without being picked up, we would have, well, the government would have effectively excluded co-ops without knowing. And it was, great to see how they turned that around and were able to exempt co-ops from that particular provision. But we have to be vigilant about that because, as I said, I've said it a couple of times that there is a lot more to be done around education and awareness raising about co-ops. Next slide. So this is where I wanted to have a bit of a call to action because certainly we can see from the people we're working with in the Department of Health, Disability and Ageing that the work of the Productivity Commission at the moment, and they've developed a report, an interim report it is, called Delivering Quality Care More Efficiently. And it is basically looking to prioritise 3 areas of work. One is around reforming quality and safety regulation to support greater cohesion. So that's code for instead of everybody having to get registration under the NDIS and aged care and veterans care and healthcare and whatever, harmonising that where they can. Secondly, embedding collaborative commissioning to create more integrated services to break down the silos, which is, again, very closely aligned to what you're trying to do in some of your communities. And finally, to establish a national framework to support investment in prevention, early intervention and prevention. So that is something to be watched. We certainly made a very extensive submission and have been supported with other people we're working with, particularly Michael Pervin from the Independent Health and Aged Care Pricing Authority, who is very committed to co-ops and particularly for their ability to improve productivity in regional, rural and remote communities. And then the next slide, which is my final slide, is just the closing comments. And and that is to say that be aware that the cooperative legal and governance frameworks provide a structure and a discipline for empowering communities to meet community needs through cooperation. So we, in the Care Together journey, we came across people that were doing lots of top-down collaboration, but at the end of the day, they had no discipline. They had no legal or governance structure for actually building cooperation into it. And that's what the cooperative difference is. You know, it gives you a legal model, which is in Australia, it's the cooperative national law, which is harmonised registration for cooperatives, and it gives you a way of governing, which is where the cooperative principles and values and the mutual value measurement comes in. The second point is to say that current policy and machinery of government changes are aligned to improving productivity of care and support services. So again, we can see this very clearly where people from the Department of Social Services now have moved in to the Department of Health, Disability and Ageing. And this is where the future is going to be, you know, around improving productivity and looking at ways in which structures like co-ops can actually help improve that productivity. And the third point is to invest now in place-based solutions with a commitment to empowering local communities to design innovative solutions to improving health and wellbeing outcomes. And I think that's an absolutely appropriate point for me to end on, because that's where Eugene started, you know, in terms of what he described that he wants to do, or the PHN wants to do, in terms of the 4 communities that you've identified. So I hope that wasn't too much information. You're going to get the slides and you could go through it. Hope we'll have an opportunity to work more with you, but hopefully it's enlightened you and that you've at least learned something perhaps that you didn't know about co-ops before we started. Thank you for your patience and time.
Thank you so much, Gillian. Wow, what a great deep dive into community cooperatives. I know I learnt a lot from your presentation, so I want to thank you very much for being so generous in your sharing of what you know and what you've learnt. It was wonderful to hear about the so many different case studies and how they're supporting the different cohorts that we all work with: older people, people with disability, vulnerable populations. So we will share this presentation with everyone following this meeting. There has been a few questions that were raised a little earlier. So Lisa Cahill basically said, nice to see you and hear about your success. Are there any aged care support homes that are cooperatives in Northern Sydney?
Not that I know of. Not that I know of. I mean, I can only dream about what cooperatives could do to residential care, but that's a story for another day. No, I'm not aware of any.
Well, it could be a great opportunity. We have got one of the fastest aging populations in our region. So, Lisa, maybe something to have a think about. There was also a question from Elizabeth Bullock. Elizabeth, you raised your hand. Are you still there? Do you want to ask your question now to Gillian?
Yeah, I actually ended up putting in the chat, but I'm happy to expand on it. So I come from a mental health background, but a peer-led mental health background, and I can see a great opportunity for a community to set up a co-op that focuses on crisis intervention and maintaining mental health wellness. And I know that the Northern Beaches has Moana, which is very loosely put together. Do you know, Gillian, off the top of your head, if there's anything of that nature around that's been around for a couple of years and maybe we could use as a, I don't know, footprint potentially? Because I know there's a lot of people are risk averse when it comes to mental health. So I think I can see that being one hurdle.
Yeah, I mean, there certainly are examples in disability, and the one that I focused on with Nanda is a good example, and I think there's some parallels there where, you know, people with disabilities who'd been long-term on disability support pensions, you know, were supported through the co-op to have jobs, you know, and to, you know, now be, you know, expanding that further. What I would say to you, Lisa, is I didn't get into this sort of detail, but in Care Together we had a number of ways in which co-ops could form. One was for new co-ops to start, which ended up being what we did most of, because there were a bit of a dearth of examples of care, of co-ops in the care and support economy. We were able to support existing co-ops. So for an example of that was Giradala up in Bowen in Queensland. But the other area that we were able to support was for other organisations to convert to become a co-op. And BCCM would very much...
At the same time, it's like, are you going to manage it if it comes in?
Oh, Kyle, you've just muted. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, Gillian.
Sorry, no, it's yeah, the UK is converting. So, you know, there may, I guess what I'm saying, Elizabeth, and we wouldn't know this until we got to work with you, but, you know, the opportunity to sort of see, well, is there an organisation that would be interested in converting to become a co-op? So that would be, you know, I'll certainly ask around with some of these. I mean, there are others in BCCM that know every co-op, and there's hundreds of them, but I'll certainly, if I find any other examples, I'll let you know. I did also just want to go back to Lisa, because I just wanted to reinforce that when I said there's no care co-ops, the Silk model, of course, it's in disability, and we think about care and support sectors. I mean, that's very much an example of a care co-op. But the other thing it's providing an example of as well is this idea of secondary co-ops and networking them so that they can be sustainable. And that is a point that I think is really important to think through with, particularly when you're working in care and support sectors, the regulatory and compliance burden is very important. So shared services, I think, probably needs to be part of your solution.
Thanks, Gillian. There's another question from Jasmina. Jasmina has her hand up. Over to you, Jasmina.
I do indeed. So, Gillian, I work for an organisation that works with refugees and people who have survived torture and trauma. And in this region, the visibility of our client group is much less than it is, say, in Southwest Sydney or Western Sydney. So the question would be, if there was a co-op to be formed by a local community where you have a group of people who are highly invisible, how does the, whatever is the mainstream of North Sydney, how do they actually learn to value and even see the group that's largely invisible, if you know what I mean? So it could be even more complex if you talk about groups such as seniors in refugee communities. You have this double layer of invisibility associated with intersectionality. So if these people are not on the radar of your average person in North Sydney who might like to start a co-op, how does a PHN then ensure the representation and care for marginalized communities within a larger community?
Well,
sorry, and there was a part of the other part of the question is around that, and then part of the question is clearly there's a lot of work needed to actually start a co-op, and for that formative work and grassroots work. Again, if you're talking about community members, not us as organizations being members of co-op, how does that get supported, and who supports that?
Yeah. Well, it's a big question. But can I just say, firstly, I'm going to address your last point first, and that is that, the Care Together program, I mean, it's taken Melina and I over 10 years to actually get that up and running. So these ideas, don't just happen overnight. But the answer to your question is that if funders, governments, really want to make a difference for these marginalised communities. You've given an example of refugees and people suffering from trauma and torture, but there are lots of other smaller groups of people in communities that can benefit. And I guess what BCCM's approach would be in a situation like this, if, for example, you were one of the projects, would be to start to connect some of these people with other co-ops that are working in similar areas. The principle of co-ops helping other co-ops so that they can actually start to learn about the cooperative model and build some confidence about that, and network as part of a wider network. But, this may well be an example of one of the co-ops that Eugene and his team might be interested in supporting. But everything you've said about the time it takes, and people need to evolve and to understand, they need to see the value in that their lives will be better and improved as a result of the co-op. But we certainly have got a methodology and an approach for sort of stepping people through that process. But it's their lived experience that's going to bring out the essence of what that co-op would do and how it would operate.
Mm-hmm. And so to follow on from that, the idea that we need to build capacity of marginalized groups is very important. However, there is another piece of work that needs to happen, which is work with a larger community, which isn't a marginalized group, to actually learn to see and understand who lives in their community. And I don't think that exists at the moment. So I think we need to do that. That work needs to be in parallel. Your bigger co-op that includes other community members actually needs to learn these people also live in your community at the same time as one builds capacity of refugee-led organizations.
Yeah. Eugene.
Oh.
You just said, yep, you didn't want to say anything? No,
Eugene agrees.
I absolutely agree with you, Jasmina. And the thing is that, I mean, you're presenting a sort of a potential case study, but, until we can sort of sit down and work it through, what you'd be looking for is people in the community with an interest, in addressing the needs of these people so that it is truly a community-led response. But with each of these examples you've given me, I'm going to, Eugene, go back to Melina, and if there are some examples that we can give you that help inform this, then we certainly will do that.
Thank you. We have another question, hand raised, Li Zeng.
Hello, Gillian. That's amazing model. So I work for Mission Australia. We work closely with the community and hear the voices and to adapt our services. However, I'm just interested in this model. How could a large organization like Mission Australia fit in the picture?
Well, you could convert to become a co-op.
I will talk to our CEO.
Really serious. That's what you could do. Okay, how could Mission Australia? So look, there's lots of ways. I'm just going to draw out one. Like down, and I know you're not necessarily in the Eurobodalla community, but the project I talked about with the independent workers, they're mostly in disability. Some are in aged care, and they want to get more into aged care. What they're looking at is this new provision in the new Aged Care Act around associate providers, so that they would work with co-op friendly providers who are registered. That's one way, that would be one way. So, I'd need to, first of all, I think the thing I do need to say to you is that Mission Australia would have to embrace the co-op model in the way that you have, because not all of them are like that. Like I used to work for one of those. I led one of those aged care organisations that drew its model as a pyramid, and the people that were least empowered but needed to be most empowered were right at the bottom. So there's a whole way of rethinking how things are done. And, when I look at the way our Care Together team, it's been a relatively small team, how we've been really nimble. And it's absolutely amazing sometimes when don't get me wrong, we've had systems and we're building systems into these co-ops. But, when you actually put the people that you're serving at the centre, and prioritise that relationship, things happen a lot more quickly and they actually happen better and for a longer sustaining period of time. So, but that example of the associate provider would be one way, but you would need to, it's not a case of just saying to Mission Australia, to your CEO, let's get more involved with, you know what I mean? Like they'd have to show some interest. We'd need to work with them and educate them about it. Because look, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of really, really good not-for-profits, and I worked for one of them. So it's not like saying what they're doing is wrong. That is one model. But the thing is that particularly when you're trying to work in thin markets, it's harder to sustain all that hierarchy. You need to be much more responsive, and get a much closer connection to the people receiving the care and the people giving the care. And that's what we're trying to do through these projects.
And we have a question from Georgina. Thank you for your patience, Georgina.
Oh, that's okay. And thank you, Gillian, and thanks to the PHN. I think this has been a really great session, and I knew a bit about co-ops, but some of these models have just got me thinking, particularly that shared services one. But my question, I have come from more of a provider background, worked in aged care, NDIS, a lot of different services. So my question is, what governance features have you seen work best for health and wellbeing cooperatives, especially balancing that community voice with, let's face it, the very significant compliance demands that often funders are doing? Even when you were sharing that example of the self-managed product in home care, I felt a little triggered because I was thrown back to a time of trying to develop a customer portal with a provider around that product and the risks that you've got to manage with that. So just interested if you could expand on that a little bit.
I missed some of it because you broke up a bit. So what governance systems are you saying would be appropriate for
health and wellbeing cooperatives.
and
So
wellbeing.
noting this, you know, often significant compliance that you need to meet for a funder, whether it's, you know, something around that aged care space or mental health.
Well, look, you know, I think what I would say to you about that is that, you know, those examples that I've given you about Murrumbidgee, around Silk, you know, those examples of primary and secondary co-ops, I think are the way that you actually are able to manage the complexity and the regulatory compliance issues. So you remember with the Silk model where I said to you that they are the registered provider, Silk is. And the families that want to join with their family governed homes that want to become a Silk provider do that because they know they can't do it, you know, in the homes. They want to focus on the here and there in terms of supporting their young people. So, you know, that would be how we would approach that. We have got examples of like the Cooperative Life, which is a small worker-owned co-op here in New South Wales, but it is quite small. I mean, it has branched out into some regional areas, and the way they do it is just by staying small and being nimble, and they are registered. But, you know, I do think that the magnitude of the opportunity, I was going to say problem, but the magnitude of the opportunity is such that you've got to be looking at models that enable these smaller co-ops to scale. And that's why, and it's not surprising that the Department of Health, Disability and Ageing in this 12-month extension, part of the area that they want us to really focus on are the two examples of the shared services. The Murrumbidgee one, which is a place-based example. There's no reason why that couldn't work in a regional area, you know, in a local area, and the national one.
Thank you.
And let me just also say to you, Georgina, I mean, we're living and breathing this with the Eurobodalla project, the co-op there, the worker co-op, where what Care Together has done, we've brought in an expert in regulatory compliance, initially around the NDIS, and that person is actually going through the motions with the workers now to develop all of their policies, train them, understand it, with a view to taking them, supporting them to go through their registration next year, early next year. So, and, you know, the design challenge we will have after that, you know, will be, well, where does that secondary co-op sit, you know, because Eurobodalla is technically, you know, one of the primary co-ops. So it may evolve in the way that Silk had into a secondary co-op. So
thank you.
Yeah, but, you know, I hope that helps.
Yeah.
And thank you for, you know, seeing the good parts of what I've talked about.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Reassuring for me to hear as well.
Well, thank you, Gillian. Are there any final questions? We could take one more, but if not, that was a wonderful. There is another question.
Yeah.
Okay, is that in the chat?
Yeah.
It's Lisa Stradwick.
Yes, this is a question. Curious to know if any service gap areas have already been identified by Sydney North as co-op candidates. Yep.
So by that
Charlotte.
I mean, hi. By that I mean, are there, because I can see so clearly how this is relevant for rural and remote. So I'm curious, because I'm living in Sydney North, where the gaps are that you think we might be able to address with co-ops.
Thanks, Lisa. I think there are a number of opportunities that we see in this space, looking at navigation services for people accessing services, for example, peer work support, community engagement, backbone support for some of the hubs, and a whole range of other services that are currently provided by other organisations. I think the key, though, for us is that making sure this is a grassroots initiative, and that the community identify the issues that matter most to them, and therefore through this process are engaged in designing and delivering the solutions that matter to them most. So that's really the approach, but we can see some clear opportunities already.
Okay, thanks. And thank you, Gillian. It's a flashback to previous roles that I've had when I was living in the country. So I'm very interested to hear how this is going to work in the city.
Yeah. I mean, Lisa, can I just say something really provocative? And that is, you know, there was a wonderful Grattan Institute report done some years ago that actually said what we should be doing is having place-based commissioning in cities, you know, where you actually bring communities together. You know, those boundaries about what defines communities are there now, you know, but for some reason we do it all from on high, you know, through national bodies, and they filter down to the states. So, you know, there's absolutely no reason why cooperatives couldn't be brilliant in metropolitan areas. It's just about people having the will to do it, and breaking down the silos and the resistance that some people would have to that, because, you know, it means sharing and cooperating. And it also, done well, puts the people receiving the care at the centre of what you're trying to do. But thanks for your question, and you're lucky to have a good PHN that's prepared to have a go at this. It's really exciting.
Thanks, Gillian. So look, we are at time. I want to thank Gillian for that amazing presentation. I think we've all learned something from that, and that's really great information. And thank you for your time, Gillian, and for presenting that information to everybody. There are going to be lots of questions that come from this, so please feel free to contact us with your questions and for us to respond to. We will be talking to you next about what's next from this, so there will be a follow-up at some point in the future, and we'll get back to you. Look, I think that having 56 people on this call, and most of you actually stayed for the whole lot, is a really good signal for us. So clearly there's a lot of interest in this space. If you have ideas, we want to hear them. You know, this is really an important grassroots approach. We don't really want to be prescribing what the cooperatives should be doing, and we have ideas, but we really want that to be a grassroots initiative. And we'll be talking more about the logistics and practicalities of our next steps in the next few weeks. So I'm going to close off. Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you for your questions, and we will get back to you very shortly. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.